Well, the Bible consists of two testaments, covenants, solemn agreements between God and his people. And in the Old Testament, the covenant was between God and the Jewish people. At the Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments were the terms and conditions of the covenant of grace that God had given to the people of Israel, mediated through Moses. And the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they inherited that covenant. They kind of became their bloodline. And Gentiles are those who are outside, beyond the pale, not part of it. I'm a Gentile. I don't have any Jewish blood in me at all. And most people living in the UK, in fact, there's only, I think, about 16 million Jews in the world today. Most people, therefore, are by definition Gentile. What? Are we all outside of the covenant purposes of God? Well, Paul tells us in Ephesians chapter 2, that's exactly how it was. We used to be, he says, separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants and promises, having no hope without God in the world. That's a fairly bleak outlook. But in Jesus Christ, the covenant has been renewed. A new covenant, Jesus said, sealed with his blood. A new agreement between heaven and earth, and an opportunity not just for those who are flesh and blood descendants of Abraham, but those who are the spiritual descendants, those who follow in the faith of Abraham, those who follow in his footsteps from the heart. A true Jew, Paul says elsewhere, is not one outwardly in the circumcision of the flesh, but one who's changed inwardly, the circumcision of the heart. And when someone comes to Christ, they're grafted in to the Israel of God. They become part of that one eternal purpose and people that God has. In verse 14, it says, he himself, Christ, is our peace, who has made us both one and broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. If you'd have gone to the temple back in the times when Jesus was there was the court of the Gentiles, the court of the women, and court of the men, and the high priest's area, the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could go once a year. But the Gentiles were outside. And if you went in, you would risk the death penalty. It wasn't a place for you and I to come. But through the gospel, God has made a way that we can come through all those courts right into the very Holy of Holies, into the presence of God himself, because we've now been grafted in. We're no longer aliens and strangers, but fellow members, citizens with God's own people. We have become part of the family. And that's a wonderful thing, because God is able to do something for us. And he's able to do something for the nations of the world. Right back in the beginning in Genesis 12, God promised to Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sand on the seashore, and that in his seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed. In the gospel, that new covenant brings us in to the place of blessing, so that we too may inherit the promises by faith and become one with God, one with Israel.